Boy, there are a lot of airplanes out tonight. Not sure why. I live near a small airport, little municipal airport, but yeah, there's a lot of them out tonight for a Monday. Hi, Misha here, and guess we'll do another black box, and for once the topic will be firearms based. It was kind of out of nowhere that this came up because honestly, this whole thing, I'm not going to say it didn't have interest for me, but it was tertiary. It was kind of on the fringe. I remember kind of checking in with the situation maybe around January, February, and hearing it was going to trial, and that's kind of the last I really delved into it until when we were doing our most recent Patreon Q&A for the Mishaco channel. This question was asked, and Fox and I answered it, and in the comments it was said we had a bad take on it, that we were wrong. And one of the responses I had was, perhaps I was misinformed, perhaps I misremembered. After all, we answered the question over having lunch at a restaurant, so it was very much off the cuff. So, did I? Were we off? What's really going on? First though, here's the clip from the Patreon with the question asked and what Fox and I both said.
Let's move on to Appley C. He wants to know our thoughts on the CRS firearms debacle. Well, we probably have a lot of opinions, and there's certain things that I can say that I'm not because I don't personally know Matt, but to be honest, I was just never a real big fan of his content in the beginning, and nothing he did particular, it just wasn't anything that held my interest. And
we all have styles. I mean, just this morning someone was saying they don't like that I do hour-long videos.
Right.
That is totally valid. Trust me,
right.
If you don't like watching an hour, that takes longer to make it. I wish I could make 5, but yeah.
Even when I first came on, I'm like, I can make a 5-minute video.
I remember that.
30 minutes, 40 minutes. It goes. That's why we're taking you guys along with us
when
while we're
you
eating.
like something.
I think we're good. Check whenever you're ready. No hurry. Together, yes. Thank you. But I think what Matt was trying to do was really, I'm actually going to say a little more than poke the bear. I'm going to say go into the bear cave, because
he was kind of flaunting it.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, if you want to do things that push it, okay, if you're pushing the envelope, but I kind of have a problem when you start selling things to other people and
roping them in.
Because, man, there's a lot of guys that ignorance of the law, you guys know, is still breaking it. So I think when you're selling people products and you're benefiting money, almost breaking the law, there's a lot of easier ways to make a dollar, and now you see the situation he's in. I mean,
yeah. Well, and if you're going to not only sell those at gun shows, but also do it on YouTube,
right?
It's really hard to complain that they come down on you. You were making it. It'd be one thing if you're doing it in the privacy of your own home and they just barged in. That I would object to. Mm-hmm. You're not showing it or whatever. But the way he made it very well known, what did you think was going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, we can all have our opinions on guns and things, but even the arm brace stuff. But man, the gray area really starts to become black and white on this on his situation. And man, I hope his family is okay, and I wish the best for him. But you won't see us pushing envelopes on things.
No. We have too much to lose.
I'm a reserve firefighter. Misha has an excellent job. We have family.
My family's police, so
yeah, I can't lose any strikes.
No,
not happening.
It's just not what we do. Okay, so that's what we said. I've dug into it a little more since then. It's been a couple of weeks. Some things I've uncovered, discovered, and one perspective I want to give. Now, lots of people have approached it from a pro 2A or even First Amendment perspective. I've even seen some people say it's a Fifth Amendment issue, and so on and so forth. I've seen lawyers weigh in. I've seen lots of people in the gun community weigh in. One thing I haven't seen mentioned as much, and something I can speak to with a lot of first-hand experience, is the federal firearms license holder angle. Because seeing CRS firearms, Matt Hoover was an FFL holder with an SOT. So what that means, how it is the same, how it's different from a private citizen, what's going on, how does that change things? Because it definitely does. Now the other individual involved, Christopher / Justin Irving, I actually don't know much about. I've been trying to do a quick Google. There's not much out there about him. So if I make any mistakes or missteps on him, apologies in advance. This is a black box video. Although, depending on how this video goes in the comments, because I'll be honest, whenever you guys comment, I learn things, and that's good. I sincerely read comments and actually take them to heart. I mean, heck, the whole reason I'm doing this video is because of comments. I don't get offended, far from it, when people say something's wrong or I'm wrong. It actually interests me. I think, why am I wrong? And kind of go into it. So if this video kind of does well and I learn things, I might do a more condensed version on the main Mishaco channel. However, that channel we keep very non-political for a myriad of reasons. So we may not. We'll see. It's not off the table, but it's not for sure yet. We'll see how this black box goes. And speaking of going, where to start with this whole thing? Well, let's talk about legalities. I've read some say that Matt and Justin did not break the law. They did nothing wrong. It's unjust. It's tyrannical. It's a banana republic. Yada, yada, yada. Even calling them political prisoners. To that I say, wrong. By definition, they broke the law. As in, they went to trial. There was a prosecutor. There was a defense. The case was heard by 12 jurors, 12 members of society, 12 of their peers. And the verdict was unanimous, at least on most charges. Yeah, found guilty. So by definition, they are convicted criminals, convicted felons. But it's not over yet. Don't, hold that thought. But they did go to trial, and they were convicted. Next step, and as of recording this video on July 17th at the moment, they have not been sentenced. And I do want to mention this point, because I've also seen people write that Matt is going away for 45 years in jail. In prison, rather. No, that's not really true. In theory, he could be facing up to 45 years if all of his convictions were put back to back and not combined, not time served concurrently, not time served over the last couple of years that Justin, the last year that Matt's been in prison. That's not likely, especially considering Matt doesn't have a prior record. Typically, most people who violate the NFA go away for 5 to 10 years. Sometimes usually less, and of course it's a federal crime, so you have to serve 85%, but there's also caveats there of halfway houses and this and that. So how much time will he actually serve? The sentencing is at the end of this month. Theoretically, yes, it can be many years. But realistically, on the outside, you're looking at 5 to 6 years. However, on the other end of things, in theory, the judge could rule time served. And then he goes on probation. He's a felon, but, time served on probation. That's possible. Probably, the reality, somewhere in the middle. Somewhere between 2 and 4 years. I'm just guesstimating here. The judge has latitude. Now, this might shock you to learn, because I'm going against what the gun community has drawn ranks up. And the rule is now, you have to say that he did nothing wrong. The ATF was 100% to blame. He's 100% innocent. He's a martyr. He's a hero. I am not that way. You know me. You know that I don't view the world black and white like that. and I'm kind of known for giving controversial opinions. Honestly, they kind of confuse me sometimes why they're controversial for a lot of folks, but they're my honest and sincere opinions. And I will tell you, even if I'm wrong, I don't just jump to a conclusion. I do think about my stance before making it. That said, I don't really see anything he did that means he should serve time behind bars. It wasn't a violent crime. He didn't steal money from citizens. Well, maybe he did. We'll get to that later, but not really. There might be some tax issues involved, yada, yada, yada. Honestly, with all the time that they've been away, it seems like to me just doing time served would both make the point and also show leniency on a frankly controversial, kind of hot button case. Let's also not forget, and something that Fox pointed out when we were doing our thing, he has a family. That combined with no prior convictions and no prior really issues as far as I'm aware, that should really give some leniency. And of course his age, relatively young, making a mistake. More planes, and now the dog notices. But that's just what I think. It means nothing. I'm not the judge, I'm not a lawyer. So it really doesn't matter what I think. And quite frankly, in the court of law, it doesn't matter what you think too. What about those 12 jurors? I believe that Matt was convicted on 5 out of 8 charges. Most of those had to do with basically illegal machine gun manufacturing, distribution, marketing, yada yada, and conspiracy, yada yada yada. We'll get into more of that later. But that's what he was convicted with. And all 12 jurors voted guilty. That was their verdict. Now, this was in Florida. I've seen a lot of people call them 8 Karens and 4 Bud Light drinkers. You know what's funny? If they had acquitted him, found him not guilty, the exact same people would be lauded by the gun community. The fact is, I don't know those 12 people. Do you? I know nothing about them, nothing about their political bent. I can say if you take a dozen average people in Florida, you're going to get some pro-2A people in the mix. Now, what kind of pro-2A, who knows? And I've seen some people say that, they weren't experts in firearms. They didn't know what they were talking about. The ATF kind of confused them and did this. You know what? Probably, because it is confusing. But the problem with the jury of your peers, that doesn't mean you get a jury of experts. If you're a doctor and you're going to trial for a medical crime, and we're not talking like a medical license type crime, but actual a crime that you performed as a doctor, you're not guaranteed 12 doctors as jurors. Same goes if you're a lawyer. If you do something wrong, if you're Saul Goodman and you go to trial, you're not going to get 12 lawyers in the box. That's just not how that works. They are just people called in for jury duty. Now there are situations where jurors can be dismissed. You can go online and see what that is. But I've had several friends that did jury duty, and most of them are just people. And I've seen some people say that they're too dumb to get out of jury duty. That's asinine, frankly. Maybe they're not smart enough to get out of jury duty, or maybe they're actually just patriotic citizens who believe in the rule of law, that know it's kind of their duty as an American, and so they do jury duty. It's distasteful at times, but it's something that everyone should be up for doing, because everyone has the right to a jury trial if they want it in these situations. So you don't know who they were, what they did, their educational background. So I do find it distasteful, but just because the verdict that was handed down people don't like, they kind of attack the jurors, knowing nothing about them. We also don't know the full transcript of the court. We don't know the evidence shown, what was directed by the judge. We know bits and bobs. We have some after-action reports from Matt himself on the YouTube channel when it happened. But, yeah, so I don't think going at the jurors is that. So why did they convict? Well, it's because they felt by the letter of the law what he did was illegal. So what is the law? Machine guns, select fire or just full auto, evolved in the late 19th century and became known, mostly thanks to the Thompson, the BAR, and a few others, after World War I. In the 1920s, you could just go into a hardware store and buy one. Now, they were expensive, especially a Thompson back in the day. But you could just go buy one. This would change in 1934 with the passage of the National Firearms Act. This is where we get SBRs, SBSs, limitations on sound suppressors, all that too. It set up a registry and a tax system. This is where full autos were taxed. And the idea was to basically be a passive ban. We'll charge such a high tax and have such an annoying paperwork system that most people can't afford these. And of course the reasoning was criminals had been using, which was true, there were BARs and some Thompsons obviously used in crimes in the 1930s. Honestly, if you go back and look, it's amazing how lightly armed the police were back then too. You're looking at like 38 caliber revolvers, no body armor to speak of. Most that's it. Yeah. Meanwhile, the criminals, who frankly often, because thanks of prohibition, but bootlegging, had plenty of money, could go out and buy a Thompson. So that's what they did. This was further reinforced, and the FFL system was set up over the next several years, being in 1938, on and on. In 1968, we get the Gun Control Act, which kind of further reinforced and solidified the FFL system, the NFA, and it also, that year, there was an amnesty on machine guns. If you had one that had not prior been registered, which would be illegal, you could bring it in, register it, get it on the list, and there you go, no questions asked. A lot of guns brought back from World War II and Korea and Vietnam got on the 68 registry. This is where a lot of interesting guns kind of come on. And things kind of stayed the same through the 70s. But in 86, there was a change made where no new serials could be put on the machine gun registry. It was closed. Boom. May 86, what serials are on there? That's it. No more. And this started the pre-ban, post-ban situation, the post-dealer sample situation, all this. Now, I want to say that all these things, 38, 68, even 86, these were not executive orders. These were not the ATF. These were Congress creating a law, passing a law, sending it in front of the president, the executive to sign, and it being signed into law, which was the situation. Executive orders start coming into play with 1989 when George H. Bush signed the import ban on semi-autos. And around the same time, people started getting clever with ways to get around machine guns. I remember there was a Sten clone that had no trigger because of the way that the NFA was written, you know, one pull of the trigger, all that. They thought, well, we'll just make a Sten gun, a tube submachine gun that just runaway fires. You pull it back, let it go forward, and it runs until it's empty. If you're thinking that sounds horribly unsafe, you would be correct. And quickly, they would make this illegal. Now, this was the ATF doing some interpretation way back when. Other things that would fall into it were so-called lightning links. Now, if you look at an M16 lower, it has 3 access pins. You know, hammer, and then you have your trigger, and then you have what we usually think of as an auto sear system that retards the hammer going forward until the bolts and battery, thus full auto or 3-round burst, which is actually much more complicated for the counting system. But a semi-automatic lower, which at the time was basically your SP1, that was the most AR-15s were SP1s in the 80s, although you had a few like Syndras that weren't. They only had 2 pins. So one workaround was something called a lightning link, which you could drop in to a lower, and it would make the gun full auto, sort of. It wasn't operating the same way a military machine gun would be. Basically, it was a controlled malfunction, if that makes sense. But it was just a link, a device. Well, this was declared a machine gun part, an auto sear, and there are actually several hundred on the registry, because it was one way to easily convert an SP1. Now, the way they would do a machine gun before the end of the registry, it wasn't just the frame, the receiver is the machine gun part. Whenever you have a gun, there has to be one part that's the firearm, because when you tear it down, otherwise you could say, I have this gun all in pieces, there's no gun here. It would only be a gun when assembled. Well, that would be a good way to evade the background check system, the FFL system, etc. So they have to pick one part of a gun to be the gun. On the AR, it's the lower. On a lot of guns, it's actually the upper part. The AK is even weirder because of the whole trunnion system, but I digress. Well, machine guns are the same way, and they had manufacturers, people, had all kinds of ways to make a machine gun before '86 and register it. You could register a frame, a receiver, or you could register a part, a sear, as it were. And that's what was done with the lightning links when they were put on the registry. And there are other ways too, and interesting kind of companion pieces. HKs get weird, every gun's a little different. It's a whole thing. It's kind of fun, but it's also kind of amazing how some guns were made into full autos back in the day. AKs come to mind. Some of them were hack jobs, to say the least. Either way, after May of '86, full autos, no-nos. And ever since then, people have tried to find ways to kind of get around this. There's been all kinds of weird things. We've had binary triggers, we had FRTs, we've had bump stocks. There are very famous photos of pieces of string, shoelace being registered as a machine gun, quote unquote. There were those coat hanger things, or at least Sears marketed as coat hangers. They were considered a machine gun. And the thing is, whatever lets the gun shoot 2 rounds or more with one pull of the trigger. But there is gray area in there. Again, binary triggers are a good example. Front, back, each motion. And for a long time, you didn't really see a lot of this happening. This wasn't a big issue because in '94 we had the federal assault weapons ban. But when the ban came off in September of 2004, AR-15s that had been pretty niche and only manufactured by, a few companies, a dozen, maybe 2 dozen, slowly but surely exploded onto the market and popularity, and we start seeing more and more of this. A fun story too, when the assault weapons ban came off in '04, many thought that full autos were legal again, or that the registry was back open. In fact, a local news crew went to my local gun shop owned by a friend and interviewed them, basically saying, so what do you think now that full autos can be got again? And they're just like, that's not what the assault weapons ban was about. The assault weapons ban that we had in America, '94 to 2004, was cosmetic only. It didn't actually change the operation of the gun. The guns that addressed were semi-automatic only, one pull the trigger, one bullet. It banned things like folding stocks and flash hiders and bayonet lugs, things like that. It also restricted magazine capacity, although independent from guns. But yeah, people really did. And that it goes to show you that while some people were willing to accept semi-automatic AR-15s and AKs, full autos with the public have had a pretty dubious view, especially after events like Columbine. And especially after events like the Las Vegas shooting all the way up in 2017. Enter bump stocks. A quite frankly ugly device, but yeah, it was a device you attached onto an AR or similar, and it would have the gun vibrate in your hands, and that would cause your finger to automatically trip the trigger quite quickly. They were considered a firearm accessory, a part, not a firearm. And under those grounds, because the ATF said, at least the ATF's position was, we're in the business of regulating firearms, not firearm accessories parts. Therefore, with that understanding, the bump stock was legal for a number of years. Keep in mind, every time the gun shot, the trigger was being pulled, even if it was kind of, yeah. Unfortunately, a bump stock was found in the Vegas shooter, the concert shooter's kit, and that started a national furor against bump stocks. Now, we're past the Obama administration at this point. We're into the Trump administration. Now, you would think the way to handle this, if America wants to ban bump stocks, would be go through Congress. We have a Republican Congress, though. So they don't want to do this. In fact, if you remember back in 2016, a lot of congressmen were talking about the Hearing Safe Act. Funny how we didn't hear much about that after January of 2017, huh? It kind of went away. And keep in mind, too, it's Republican control pretty much across the board. So, you'd think the next step, okay, George H. Bush used an executive order. Obama used an executive order here and there for ATF stuff. Well, President Trump can use an executive order to ban bump stocks. Not good, but at least it's within the purview of his authority. Doesn't want to do that. He's a Republican. That would make him look very, very bad to the pro-2A crowd. So, who? Well, this is passed to the ATF. The presidency, the White House instructs the ATF to basically prohibit bump stocks. They come back saying, we're not in the business of, limiting firearm accessories, non-firearm things. And the response was, find a way to do it. This ultimately led to the opening of the gates and a true slippery slope of expanding their authority, their interpretive powers. So after a good bit of back and forth, bump stocks are banned. You can look this up online. There's a bunch of back and forth. It's one of the few times you'll actually also see Nancy Pelosi applauding Donald J. Trump, which, whichever side of the political aisle you're on, is a bit of a head puzzler. But this also starts the ATF's crusade against such things. We see them going after FRTs, for force reset triggers. We see them going after arm braces. And a lot of this stuff is underway by 2019, 2020, although a lot of it didn't come to fruition till later. Now, don't get me wrong, once Joe Biden got in January of 2021, he took that door that was already opened by Trump and cracked it open more and gave even more instructions to the ATF to find ways to ban more things. Does that surprise you? I will give Joe credit for one thing. His position on firearms has been very known for many, many years, longer than probably most of us have been alive, frankly. That should tell you about people staying in DC way too long. So I'm setting the stage here for what Matt and Justin did. Going back slightly to 2020, Chris Justin Irving, it's also Chris with a K, which makes my head hurt a little bit too, started making the Auto-Keycard, essentially a credit card size dilly whopper that had the outline, the etching, laser etched, of a lightning link on it. That's all it was. So he made those. They were initially marketed as a novelty, as a thing, as a card, as a memorabilia, as a keepsake, whatever. Basically, the Denver Mint, whatever, the Franklin Mint. That's what I'm looking for. The Franklin Mint thing, the commemorative coins. Now, he wasn't just giving these away; he was selling them, and this is where CRS Firearms Matt comes in. Justin and Matt make an arrangement where Matt will market these on his YouTube channel. And it starts off pretty tame, but then kind of goes from there. And that gets into who Matt is and what an FFL is kind of expected to do. Now, I don't know when Matt obtained his federal firearms license and his SOT. He ran a business. So he was marketing these from a professional, from a business perspective. And I'm not sure how many he had in his hands physically, but there are live streams that he did of him giving these Auto-Keycards away. Now, was he having them drop shipped? I don't know. But either way, he was advertising them, showing them off, and he was promoting their distribution via his live streams, and I would presume by his store too. At least, in kind of a, hey, I know a guy type way. I'm not sure though. Was never in his store. So that's kind of where we're at. The first to get in trouble was Justin, and for over a year, Matt would raise funds, well over $100,000, to help support Justin, who was in jail. He wasn't released. And then, of course, Matt himself was arrested at the beginning of 2022. And like I said, it went to trial a couple of months ago, 3 months ago now, this year. Boy, there's a lot to talk about here. And again, I'm trying my best to kind of go everything in my head. Apologies for stuff I miss. So, what's going on best I can interpret, keeping in mind that I'm not into machine guns and all this. In a nutshell, the prosecution was saying that Matt and Justin worked together to sell these Auto-Keycards, which could be cut out. You'd have a part you could drop in to an AR-15 lower, and it would go full auto. They also showed payment made, meaning that it wasn't just, Matt was just talking about them because he thought they were cool. It was a professional arrangement. He was involved. And money, like I said, was collected for these. The defense has been that they were a novelty, they were art. No instructions were given to cut them out, and that they didn't work anyway. It said that the metal was too thin, and that the dimensions of the lightning link on the card weren't right, at least not all the way, and that they would not work in all AR-15s. Presumably only in SP1s, but then again, there are a lot of SP1 spec guns out there. I don't know, don't really care. But I will say the original lightning link was made for the SP1, as it were. By the way, Colt made between 300 and 350,000 SP1s. So that's kind of the two main positions. And at first it does absolutely seem like Matt and Justin were railroaded. They were selling a card with a laser etched thing on it, part on it. So clear cut, right? They're innocent on machine gun charges. They had a business relationship. this should be thrown out of court. And that's certainly the impression that Matt gave on his various YouTube videos and streams and things like that over the year. Unfortunately, it wasn't what the jury came back with. That's because this is much more nuanced and, like everything in life, not black and white. I promised to talk about the FFL perspective. And as you know, I said in the Q&A video, it wasn't as if Matt was a private citizen operating as a private citizen. He was operating as a business, an FFL. And FFLs are held to a very different standard than a private citizen. Quite frankly, is it an absurdly unrealistic standard? Yes. Yes, it is. On top of that, though, an SOT, a special occupational tax, a manufacturer, is also held to an even higher standard. Basically, if you're an average gun owner, you need to keep your nose clean. If you're an FFL, you need to be spotless. And if you're an FFL SOT, if you're a manufacturer, I'm just being practical here. You need to have a spotless record, and you need to kiss the ATF's ass, because they are looking for any reason at all, especially in the current political climate after various shootings and after Biden took office, to revoke FFLs. How do I know this? Because I was essentially told this when I had my ATF inspection a year and a half ago. It was February of 2022. The two agents that were here basically said that the higher-ups were cracking down and looking for any infractions at all to get you on anything. And our paperwork that we have to keep, when we get a gun, we have to log it in from either the individual it came from or the FFL distributor it came from, with all their pertinent info, name, address, license number, date, of course. And then we have to put in the serial number of the firearm, the make, the model, the caliber / gauge, the type, rifle, pistol, revolver, receiver, yada, yada, yada. And one of the infractions that I got was I had an old, not old, but a few years old, M37 trench gun, the Vietnam replica Ithaca shotgun. Those guns were jointly made between Ithaca and Inland. I had Ithaca as the manufacturer in my paperwork. And the gun did say Ithaca on the barrel, but the receiver was more prominently marked Inland. And that's not what I had in my books. I had Ithaca as the maker, not Inland. While it was a minor thing, because it was, one of the few errors I had in my books, I had to go back and change it and then email the agent updated pages in my license showing the change. They also got really strict on old CNR guns. Basically, in the past, if you had a CNR gun, you could just put like the country of Oregon, there we go, origin, like Bulgaria, Russia. Now, last few years, you have to put more. The importer and the country of origin, or if you know it, the importer and the manufacturer. So if it was from Russia, instead of just putting Russia, you might have to put like Ishesk / Century Arms or PW Arms. Yeah, that's where we're at. Not saying it's right or wrong, but I am telling you just how meticulous the record keeping can be. So that's the level of scrutiny a standard FFL like myself gets. A manufacturer of machine guns, they have no latitude whatsoever, not in our current climate. They are actively looking for ways to shut your butt down. Matt knew this. He's an FFL. We know what we voluntarily signed up for when we got into this job. Every 3 years, we pay our dues to renew our license. When you're an SOT, every June, you pay your dues to maintain your SOT. position. He knew this. He also knew that he had a young child, a family, but he's also young. And there is a mentality out there of challenging authority. And I'm not saying it's wrong. Look back at the 60s. That's what a lot of the hippies were doing too, you know, challenging the man. Well, he thought he would too with this. And at first, his advertising of the Auto-Keycard was pretty tame and didn't really make a lot of waves. At first, he advertised it just like we've kind of talked about, as a piece of art, as a curiosity, as a novelty. But as time went on, he started advertising it as more than that. In fact, in multiple videos and in multiple live streams, he's on YouTube, on record, recorded him calling it a lightning link. A device, an object that is considered a machine gun. A lightning link from the 80s is a piece of steel. He's calling this a lightning link. He's also said it's something you can get to scratch that full auto itch. Now, I've seen some people say, no, he was talking about him having his SOT. No, he wasn't. He was talking about getting the Auto-Keycard to scratch the auto itch. And he was intimating that you could quickly cut it out, pop it in your gun, have some fun, and throw it away. It was being marketed as a disposable, temporary modification, temporary part to do the thing that had already been considered verboten for a number of years. He was vocal enough about this. It's a matter of record that Justin even told him, hey man, dial it back a bit. I don't believe that Justin himself, the actual maker, ever directly kind of advertised these as that. You know, that's what happens. You start off with something and it slides more and more into the zone. Now the next thing will be, well, it didn't work. And that's problematic for a few reasons in and of itself. Actually, it not working in some ways makes the situation worse, at least on a business ethics point of view. Unfortunately, especially based on his later streams and stuff, it's clear that Matt thought, in theory, in Minecraft, you could cut this out and drop it in your gun. Now, I will fully say that he never said do it and gave plans. But, you know, in theory, it was represented as such. So if it didn't work that way, it's actually false advertising, if you think about it. Because this isn't something free being given away. This is something being sold to individuals for money. Why are they buying it? I don't think many were buying it for a novelty. And yeah, intent comes into it. Whether it worked or not, people were buying these with that intention, and based on video evidence, it leads one to conclude that's how Matt was selling these, or rather promoting their sale. Yeah, they were coming from Justin, but Matt was really the face of the business, if that makes sense. So you might say, well, maybe the guys didn't know they were doing anything wrong. That's very possible, except when you follow the money. Justin paid Matt in cash. And not like, hey man, face-to-face cash. It was cash in the mail that was semi-hidden in a satchel in a purse. That's a little strange. Why not just cut him a business check? Likewise, when Matt was telling people how to buy these, they were instructed to send cash to Justin. And even told they wouldn't have to give their real address for shipping. That right there tells me that they at least knew what they were doing could be considered a little sketchy. Because that's not the normal behavior in the firearms community. In fact, most of the FFLs will only ship to your address for legal purposes. And cash? People don't pay for guns in cash. There's problems doing that. But what this activity does kind of remind me of, how people transact in illicit substances, drugs on the internet. You know, dark web shit. This is actually sounding more and more like, you know, the fabled dark web, you know, Silk Road shit. Paying in cash, giving weird addresses, and of course that also gets into, were taxes being paid on this? Was the IRS keyed in? Justin, Matt, was Matt paying taxes on the money he was getting from Justin? Was Justin paying taxes whenever he sold these Auto-Keycards? I don't know for sure, but the evidence doesn't seem to point that way. And these days, you have to pay taxes if you make even a little bit of money. That's how it is. Is it right or wrong? Quite frankly, the current tax system, I think, is total bullshit. But it is the current system. It is the current law. And while that might not apply to Hunter Biden, it does apply to you and I, unfortunately. Somehow it always falls on the working class, doesn't it? Funny that. It's almost as if those in power are able to make laws, make exemptions for themselves. So you can argue that from a business point of view, taxes weren't being paid, paperwork wasn't being done correctly, and just overall their general attitude showed that they themselves wanted some plausible deniability and degree of separation because they weren't sure. Now, if they knew these Auto-Keycards didn't work or couldn't be used to make a part, why would they care? If it was a piece of art, if it was a novelty, why would they go to these extremes? And it leads one to conclude that at least one, if not both parties, honestly thought that in theory, in Minecraft, these could be cut out and dropped into an AR. Intent. Not, you know, reality, but intent. Now, a lot of people will say, it doesn't matter. Unfortunately, you're wrong. And lawyers would agree with me on that. Intention matters a lot in the law. A whole lot. The drug analogy can be continued there. I've seen a lot of people do it. You know, if you're selling, well, I guess grass isn't a good analogy now because it's basically legal everywhere. But, you know, drugs, and they're not drugs, but if you're selling drugs, you can still get in trouble for that. Again, is it bullshit? Maybe. But it is the law. And there are a lot of people locked up today for just that reason, for different drug charges. Also, a lot of people served a crazy amount of time for literally having one joint. Yeah, or just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Not saying it's right, but I am saying this is how the law gets applied. And the drug analogy does hold. It is actually very depressing. Now, some have said that Matt contacted the ATF and they gave him the go-ahead for the Auto-Keycard, saying, nope, it's fine. There's a problem with this. Well, at least there's a right way and a wrong way. First, if you just call up the ATF and say, hey, is this right or wrong, to your local agent, that doesn't really matter. Now, if you go further and you get an opinion letter, that's better. But as we've seen over the years, opinion letters can get overturned too. No, the only way to maybe do it is to send your item to ATF Tech Branch, have them analyze it, and then get back with approval. Even then, especially like we've seen with the arm brace situation, it's not foolproof, but it's the best insurance you've got. We also don't see the arm brace manufacturers and owners going to jail. I have a fun story from that too. Back during the assault weapons ban, I had, Romanian SAR-1 and Romanian SAR-2. And I came across a folding stock. And I actually called up my local ATF office and asked the agent that answered, hey, is it legal to put this stock on the gun? Now, in reality, the way the assault weapons ban was written, if the gun was made before 1994, you could put a folding stock on, no matter when the stock was made. But according to that agent that I happened to get on the phone that day, it would be illegal to put that stock on the gun if the butt stock, which isn't dated, by the way, and no real way to date it, was made before 1994. That was how that one agent around 2000, 2001 thought the law was written. He's just a field agent. He didn't know. Assault weapons ban was very confusing. But if I'd put that stock on the gun and then gotten arrested for it, and if some prosecutor wanted to go at me at it, me calling up and saying, hey, this agent Smith, whatever, good evening, Mr. Anderson, that wouldn't have held up in court, because they'd say, well, show me a letter, show me an approval from ATF. I couldn't do that. Saying I spoke with him on the phone, you think that agent, if it was called to the stand, would actually come up and go, yeah, I told him that. Maybe if you got the one angel in the whole damn world, he'd do it, but they wouldn't. That's assuming Matt even did this. Here's the problem, and this is what sucks, but we only have Matt's word for it. He has no evidence, at least none that he presented in court, that he even contacted the ATF about this or received any kind of approval. He has no email and no letter from Tech Branch. So people saying that this was approved by the ATF, unfortunately, in court, no evidence was presented to back this claim up. So, yeah, there it is. And even if he had it, with the expansion of ATF powers since 2018, they can and have changed their minds. Again, bump stocks were legal, then they weren't. Arm braces were legal, now they're not. Sort of, although the brace isn't illegal, putting on a gun, it's really weird. But even at that, ATF has changed their mind a lot because their power has been grossly inflated thanks to several presidencies and several Congresses not willing or even able to make the tough calls anymore because they're too worried about losing political brownie points. But I digress. I get it. CRS probably didn't know that the Auto-Keycard was expressly forbade. At least the ATF would interpret it that way by the NFA and backed up by nearly a century of court cases. But their activities suggested they certainly suspected it, or at least it could be. As an average citizen, so what? In Minecraft, I would know people, especially old soldiers, most of them gone now, that brought things back from Vietnam. As an individual that the ATF would never even know existed, that the police had no reason to go into their home, they could pretty much have whatever they wanted in their attics. Of course, if they went out and did something with it, that's different. And a lot of times when guys would get the hammer come down with unregistered machine guns, it's because they opened their mouths. But as a dealer, that's different. As a dealer, we know that any time the ATF can knock on the door and ask for an inspection. I know this because back in 2019, an inspection I had, Literally was in the shower. Just picked my wife up from the airport. She'd gone to see her folks for 2 weeks. Her luggages was all over the living room. She was just cooking a snack. I had just hopped in the shower, and she comes into the bathroom and says, the ATF's here. I said, haha, yeah, you're fine. And she goes, no, I'm not kidding. Yeah, they came while I was in the shower. That's how prepared sometimes you have to be. Yeah. And that's the same position, if even more so, that Matt was in. So if he thought what he was doing might even possibly be gray verging on into the black, you have to regrettably say no to that business opportunity. It sucks. I've had to pass up things. I'll just say it now because it doesn't matter. It's years in the past. I had someone offer me a French Mat 49. Just a straight up Mat 49. Would have loved to have had that. And if I was a private citizen, maybe I would have been tempted to do it. But I knew as an FFL it wasn't possible. Ditto for a in the guide lamp box, M3 grease gun. That sucked. But as an FFL, I just couldn't take that heat or that potentiality. And even if I did give in to temptation like that, even if I did, which I don't, I would not tell a soul. Because if they don't know anything's there, who's going to come looking for it? And that was kind of my point when Fox and I did the Q&A. Unfortunately, Matt made it very, very, very clear he was involved with the Auto-Keycard system, and he made it pretty wink, wink, nudge, nudge clear that it was pretty simple to use it for other purposes. And that's kind of where you get into. And I've heard people argue, well, does that mean that coat hangers and all that are machine guns now because some of them registered? No. Because when you look at a coat hanger, its purpose, its use, isn't as an auto sear. It's a coat hanger. This is also how we kind of get away with like 80% receivers. Because at that point, it's just a block of steel at some point. The line tends to get drawn when something is clearly only intended for this one purpose or primarily intended for the purpose. If that was just a blank piece of steel, sheet steel, metal, whatever it was, okay, it's just a piece of steel. But by etching with a laser the outline of a lightning link on it, the ATF's supposition was that it clearly only had one intention, one purpose in this world, one use. It wasn't as a piece of art. It wasn't as a novelty. It was so you could easily trace it out into this. Their interpretation was, what else would you do? Why else would you pay this much money for a simple piece of steel? And even if Justin knew they didn't work that way, according to Matt's own talk, it surely seemed like he did. And that's where the prosecution called in for witnesses that bought these, and that was what they said. They purchased these under the understanding, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, that that's what these could do. Now, they argued that it was immaterial, that they couldn't be made to work that way. It's like saying, you sell me weed, I smoked it, and I didn't get high, and it turned out to be parsley. People have gone to jail for that. Lots of people, frankly. Intent. And then on top of intent, you have conspiracy, which is because Justin and Matt operated over state lines and they involved money. And that was really the big mistake. That let aspects get involved that otherwise maybe could not have. And that's the problem. And that's how the law views it. Now, that's just the prosecution's side. Unfortunately, the defense really didn't have much. Matt picked Fudbusters as his defense attorney. They didn't call any witnesses. They did ask to call a couple as expert witnesses, but to be qualified as an expert witness in court, you have to meet a threshold, and their people just don't. They're not experts in this. That's how the judge ruled, and frankly, the judge was right, just based on the way the legal system, how the rules are written. So they really didn't have a whole lot of defense. Yeah, the auto key cards don't work as advertised. Yeah, the ATF barely could get one to work. Agreed. But it's intent. And that goes both ways. If you have a gun that's a semi-auto and it goes full auto on you, by definition, by absolute strict interpretation of the law, you have an unregistered machine gun. Should they lock you up? No. Because you had a sincere an honest, sincere, uninduced malfunction. Because it's not just the letter of the law, there's the spirit of the law. If you have a gun go full auto, what you do is you call the manufacturer and you send it back for warranty repair. I know this because it's happened to me more than a few times. I was even out shooting with people. They got very nervous when that happened. I was like, no, that's cool. It wasn't meant to do this. It malfunctioned. Now, if I were to keep shooting that gun for 10 years, knowing it did that, that's a little different. But if I take steps in an appropriate, timely manner to resolve it, or I disassemble the gun, that's fine. Because the spirit of the law, that's considered an accident. That's considered a malfunction. But likewise, if your gun won't go full auto, but you're putting this part in to make it full auto, it's just a malfunctioning part. The intent is automatic fire. Even if it's malfunctioning and not going full auto, that wasn't what you intended. And therefore, yeah, that's how the law is interpreted. And it can work out in our favor. Often it does. Often judges and juries respond well to admission and humility. And this is where I could be wrong. This is where I'm really going into bits and bobs, little snippets and a little bit of hearsay, so forgive me. But from what I've dug in, it does not seem like Matt Hoover took this approach. Not at all. Rather, it seems like his attitude in court was, I'm gonna outlawyer you. I'm going to play the semantics game. I'm gonna get on the technicalities, and I'm gonna beat this. He did not come in with hat in hand saying, look, I had these, I had no idea. He doubled down in his position that this is 100% legal. Everything he said was protected by the First Amendment, yada, yada, yada. And you can't convict me. That's a bad move. Even if you're being railroaded, even if the court's in the wrong. It's like when you get pulled over on the road by a police officer. He may be the biggest dick in the world. You may have been doing nothing wrong on the road. You're still polite to him. How many times do we hear stories of people literally begging the police, just being snobby, saying like, fuck the police, calling them pigs. You do that, that cop's gonna find something to get you on, especially if he's already a dick. I mean, if you see someone who's a dick, why would you ask him to show how big of a dick he can be? And if someone's being nice, roll with it. I will tell you this in a personal story. Years ago now, the statute of limitations is long, only 25 years ago. We were heading back somewhere, coming from somewhere, going to somewhere, it didn't matter where. But we got stopped in this area known as kind of a speed trap. And we added some things in the car. Not like intent to distribute, but let's just say enough for a good weekend. You wanna know a way to keep a cop away? Rip a good fart. I did that. I was in the passenger seat. No, I wasn't driving. I know, shocker. There was stuff in the glove box. He never looked in the glove box because I ripped a good one. It wasn't even intentional. I think it was just nerves. He just is like, eh? It just gave a warning and went away. So there you go. There's a free tip that worked back in the 90s. Yeah, kind of going back to the whole drug culture thing, though, and just ways to deal with it. But yeah, from what I've seen, the attitude in court wasn't the attitude that usually gets sympathy from judge and jury. Again, you could be 100% in the right. It still never hurts to be humble and have humility. It never, ever does. And it just doesn't seem like that was the way they approached the situation. But if I'm wrong, and maybe one day we'll get the complete transcript, that'd be great. If someone's already got it and I'm just behind the times, that's entirely possible. But the attitude in court doesn't seem to be the tack you take. In fact, it a little bit smacks of some of the sovereign citizen way of getting into actuallys and technicalities and this and that, and focusing too much on the letter of the law and less on the spirit of the law. Yeah. Ask any manufacturer who's done a semi-automatic version or parts kit conversion from a full auto select fire to a semi. Send that in to ATF Tech Branch. Sometimes they'll approve it with very little changes. Other times they won't. And they make you do ridiculous things to make it incapable of being converted to full auto. And it is entirely arbitrary, entirely subjective, and entirely unfair. No arguments there. This is a side I've been more active on. Why is this legal but not that? A good example people bring up in the AK world, on the regular AK, third axis pin, we'll call it the rate reducer, the out of battery safety. That's the full auto part. That's the sear, along with the hole in the receiver to make a gun go bang, bang, bang. That's the part that the ATF's decided that separates the men from the boys, full from semi-auto. But then you get to guns like the Romanian PSL. Those had third pins, is literally an out of battery safety. A lot of guns have out of battery safeties because it's a safety. The M1 carbine, for example. Okay, the SKS is another one. Although if the firing pin sticks, you're screwed. But anyway. But the ATF decided since the PSL is an overgrown AK, it can't have that third pin, that device, or even the hole in the receiver. If it does, it's a machine gun, even though it can't and never has gone full auto. It's a 10-shot 7.62x54R DMR. It's not meant for full auto. But that's the ruling. As several years back, Classic Firearms had some guns imported by Pioneer Arms that were just straight up Romanian PSLs, original receiver and all. They had to do a major recall on those real quick. Now, no one got in trouble because it was an honest mistake. However, if someone had kept one, then it would have been considered an unregistered machine gun. Same thing happened with IWI, with the first Galil Ace pistols that came in. They didn't have the out-of-battery safety, but they had the third pinhole in the receiver and just an empty third pin. Had to recall those. Again, if you turned it in, no harm, no foul. It was an honest mistake. But if you kept one, unregistered machine gun. Now, I have read, but not verified, that the ATF did send a cease and desist letter to the Auto-Keycard. If anyone knows if they actually did, please let me know. But if it's true, then they did give them a chance to just stop. And if they continued on, they had their warning. Now, if they didn't send a cease and desist, if they just came down on them like this with no warning, that is bullshit. But that is kind of how things are going. Because Matt called this a lightning link, whether it functioned as one or not. People bought it expecting to get a lightning link, or at least an easily made lightning link. And the ATF has been clear for years that lightning links are a machine gun. All of those may be unjust, may be ridiculous, but they are fact. And that's where we kind of get into the whole thing. With the way that CRS and Fudbusters pursued this, it almost seemed like a media stunt, a stunt for clout. And I think that's the tragedy. I think they thought that they were so right. They read the law, they interpreted the law the way they wanted to. They kept on, they took it to court, and I'm sure we're sincerely shocked with the verdict that came down. They thought this would be a great opportunity to get huge cred for himself, the gun store, and I'm going to say, yeah, help out the 2A community. I'm not going to be mean about it. I don't know the guy. I'm not going to call anyone names. But it was certainly have been a big publicity thing. In fact, it has been. In fact, there is a ton of sympathy and a ton of outreach and donations, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So financially, well, I'm not going to say it's worked out well because, well, he's lost his business and firearms and everything. But I think it was people conflating TikTok and Twitter and YouTube and Instagram with the real world. Like they had been in their own 2A group so long, they lost perspective on the rest of the world. And that's what bit them in the butt, unfortunately. I get it. Their interpretation of the law, they were right. The ATF is wrong. The thing is, that's their opinion. And people in the 2A community often accuse others of having an agenda. We have to face facts that we do too. We have a pro-firearms ownership agenda. And whenever it's 50-50, 6-1, half dozen other, heck, even 75-25, we're going to go with that 25% that says pro-gun. That's our mindset. It's not right or wrong, it's just our perspective. However, there's the other side. Joe Biden's a good example of it. We know he's anti-gun. We also know he's president. But he is only one of millions. After all the school shootings, after a lot of high-profile gun violence, not getting into the causes, just saying that is a hot-button issue, and a lot of citizens are not pro-gun. Especially when you're talking NFA stuff, full auto explicitly. Machine guns scare them. Regular guns scare them. They're barely even comfortable with a pump-action shotgun. Maybe a little bit comfortable with a breech-loading shotgun. Maybe. So is it any wonder that a cheap drop-in part that turned a bog standard AR, again, this is how it's presented to them in the jury, not the reality, but how it's presented. A little part, drop it in, it's a evil M16, would scare the crap out of them. And you know, we can talk about constitutional rights, our rights, the 2A. They have rights too. We share this country with them. So yeah, let's talk about the First, the Second, and the Fifth Amendments, just because they've kind of come up in this case a little bit. With full understanding, I'm not a lawyer, with full understanding constitutional law has centuries of precedent behind it. It's not just reading the Constitution. It is not even, that's the starting point. That's the preamble. Constitutional law is all the court cases, all the precedent since 1791. That's a long time, guys. So just reading the amendments, that's not enough. That's not what any lawyer does. In fact, the amendments, they frankly don't matter. The court cases based on them, founded on them, that's what matters. So First Amendment, freedom of speech, okay? I mean, I guess we could say assembly too, but that doesn't really apply here. Can Matt say anything he wants? Yeah, he can. And it is an individual, he could probably get away with it quite a bit. Now, of course, everyone points out you can't say fire in a theater. That's true. You know, basically, your First Amendment goes just as far as it doesn't cause risk to other citizens. That's fair. I think even, you know, libertarians would agree. Maybe that's even what I am, is more of a libertarian. Who knows? Either way, I'm very much a fundamental belief in you have all the rights you can right up until they hit other people's. So I think we can agree there's certain things that freedom of speech doesn't cover, only because it puts your citizens who have the same rights as you at potential risk. The thing is, for Matt, he wasn't speaking as a private citizen. He was speaking as a federal licensed dealer and manufacturer of machine guns. And he wasn't just speaking as a hobbyist. He was a paid partner, paid advertiser, and in some capacity distributor of these devices. Businesses, well, they're held to a different level, both in the quality of their products, whether they do what they say, and the way they interact with the public. Businesses cannot say anything they want. Well, they can say it, but they should not be shocked if they face repercussions. And he voluntarily said things on his YouTube channel over and over again. And this is what I want to say. Yes, you have the right to say whatever you want. But just realize, anything you put on the internet, Facebook, YouTube, it's there. Anyone can see it. Anyone can take away what they want from it. Yeah. And this goes more for other things. Keep in mind, employers. A lot of people have lost jobs or didn't get a job because of crap they posted even years earlier on their YouTube or Twitter or Facebook. Yeah, employers are picky like that. I'm just wanting to say, be mindful of what you put on the internet. Second Amendment. That's open to interpretation. And honestly, more strict interpretation would have us more in a situation like Switzerland. However, we've been lucky. The courts have upheld it in more of a personal, more an American way. That's good. However, the NFA, 1934, something that's been a law for coming up on 90 years next year, says full automatics have to be registered. 1986 says no new registrations can happen. Therefore, since 1986, unless you're an SOT, a post sample, all those caveats, you can't make new full autos. Is this unconstitutional? Up to interpretation. But is it illegal? No, not right now. Until 1934 is overturned, or even 86, until the registry is opened up again, by the law, it's legal. Now, if you want to change the law, that's fine. Change it. But don't be surprised if you get in trouble for breaking the law. It's like back in the day, I heard a lot of people get upset that got arrested for marijuana, saying it shouldn't be illegal. It's less harmful than alcohol, even than tobacco. I tend to agree. You can grow it in their backyard for your own personal use. I tend to agree. It's still illegal, or at least it was. A lot of people went away that I think were good people that weren't hurting anyone, just growing a little grass. But the law was written in such a way that it wasn't legal. Of course, now, after lots of effort from that community, it's slowly but surely become more and more acceptable. We're almost on the verge of full legality. And that, to me, is more the avenue to take petitions and referendums and voting on the state level, the way to go with that. You can try challenging it in court. That could work, but it's risky. And people could be sitting in jail, and they could impact their family and livelihood more than they could ever possibly imagine if they try that way. So you can try a few different ways. But yeah, You have to be mindful of that. Just because you think something shouldn't be illegal, or that the law is unjust or unconstitutional, just because you think that, and you may be 100% right, it doesn't mean you can just do it and get away scot-free, because by that admission of you saying that it shouldn't be illegal, you're admitting you know it's illegal. That gets into the whole legal, lawful, all that kind of thing. And it is convoluted, and the law is far from perfect, 100%. And there's a lot of people in jail that would agree with you. I've told the story many times. I even mentioned it in the comments of the video. Years ago, long time ago, a very dear friend who I am still friends with today went away for NFA violation. I'm not going to give details. That's neither here nor there. But he went away. He spent his time. He had 5 years and got out about 4 with good behavior and halfway house and all that stuff. He's turned his life around. He's doing good. Whatever. He made something not unlike a lightning link, that was violating the NFA. He got caught and he went to jail. His stories of jail, as much as I like guns, they were terrifying. I'm not gonna lie. His stories of jail, even though he was mild-mannered, did his time, kept his head down, they terrified me. I'm only human, and you would be too. And that's why I don't want Matt to go to jail. Even if he did something technically wrong, even if he was a little arrogant in front of the jury, time served would be the best possible thing, because he doesn't deserve jail. Many people that are in jail don't deserve jail. Well, kind of wore out that battery there. I had to put a new one in. As I was saying, I heard my friend's stories of prison. And the things that I could probably never deal with, not the violence and all that. It's stuff that you might not think of, but it's the boredom that would drive me crazy, and just the wasting of your days and life and time. And he has had a very good life since then. It was hard at first, but he has, and I'm very proud of him. But one thing he does not have and never will have, firearms. That's gone forever. He also, couldn't vote for a long while. The funny thing is, you can actually get your voting rights restored, at least in some cases. Your firearms rights, you can't. If you say, well, there's a avenue, there's paperwork to do it, only in theory, not in practice. Trust me, if anyone could, this guy would have, but he has a life without guns. That's the risk. That's what you lose. Now, from my own perspective, being born disabled, all that, I've always known life is unfair. It treats you unfairly. We're not equal. Yada, yada, yada. The law is written one way, interpreted another. That's just life. It's also taught me to pick my battles. If I fought every perceived injustice in my life, I would be fighting all the time, and frankly, I'd probably be a very bitter man at this point in my life. I've always known to kind of pick my battles and save up for when it matters. When I got my FFL, I had to fight for it. And I had to go over some ATF agents' heads and probably pissed off a couple of ATF agents. But it's something I believed in, and it was right. And it's something I've wanted to do, and it's been good for me. But I also knew that, I would be under certain restrictions if I did it, and certain scrutiny. And apparently have them come in when I was in the bathroom. So that's always fun. And I think that's what bugs me about this case. This wasn't unavoidable for Matt. He voluntarily jumped in, and then he doubled down by starting to refer to them as lightning links, and then he doubled down again in court again and again, never backing off. In a perfect world, someone shouldn't have to do that. But in a realistic world, governments are powerful. We're individuals. Now, a lot of people online will have all this talk about standing up and shooting at the ATF and all this stuff. They're keyboard commandos. I'm who I am. I'm realistic about it. And you need to look at the people that are realistic about it as well. Most of us aren't going to risk our jobs and our money and even our freedom just to make a political stance, just to make a point about a piece of metal. Even if we're willing to do that to ourselves, are we really willing to put our family through that? It's one thing if only you suffer. What about your spouse? What about your kids? Maybe your siblings? Maybe your parents? What about for them? This is the reality. And this is why when you're an adult, the world isn't black and white. It's not idealistic. You know, those hippies in the 60s, they had a lot of idealistic viewpoints, you know, peace, not war, and all this stuff. And it sounded good on paper, but eventually they had to grow up. We have to face the cold reality of the world we live in. And unfortunately, Matt's facing that now when the consequences are very high. Could he have exited, found an off-ramp before? Maybe. It seems like he probably could have. But it just seems like a young man who was sure of himself, thought he was going to change the world, and it didn't work out for him. And now it's not just him facing the consequences, but it's his family. And again, that's something that Fox and I definitely stressed on our take there. So that's our take. It's a realistic take. And we are real with you. There we go. The stupid dog will quit barking. We're not going to pretend to be some ultra keyboard commandos. We're not going to put on a pretext. We're not going to come across as tough men. We're going to be real with you and with ourselves about what we would do. And there's a time and a place for fighting. And if Matt had just stuck to selling these as novelties, or maybe just stopped selling them, maybe never got involved, he could be running his gun shop now. To us, this looks cut and dry. ATF overreach. But to a citizen not within the firearms community, it seems very cut and dry to them too. He was selling a part that made your gun into an illegal machine gun. That's how it's viewed. That's how the jury views it. That's how a lot of citizens will view this. And it's very clear that machine guns have been a controlled device for 90 years. This is just the reality we live in. And public perception is a thing. Keep in mind, too, he was in Florida. The trial was in Florida. We're not talking New York or California. So I'm not saying the jurors were pro 2A, but it could have been much worse. And to be fair, they did not find him guilty on all charges. 3 charges, I believe. Maybe it was 4. He was not found guilty on. And again, sentencing has not been carried out yet. And I don't feel like the judge. I don't know. Who's to say? I want to say it'll be fair, but who knows? And of course, what's fair to one person may not be fair to another. Someone who lost a loved one in a recent shooting, if Matt got off, would see that as unfair. They would see that this device, this part, could make a shooting that much easier for anyone. I'm not saying they're right, but that's their perception. Yeah, they're not an expert. Yeah, they're not fully informed. But guess what? Neither are you. Neither am I. Not on all subjects all the time. That's just the reality. None of us are 100% informed on everything all the time. Our heads would explode. There's too much info out there. So please don't blame the average citizen on the street for being ignorant, because we're all ignorant of certain things. My brother's a doctor. He's a lot better informed and a lot smarter than me when it comes to, well, doctoring things. That's just how the world works. Again, Fox is a firefighter. He knows things and has seen things that I can't. And that's just it too. Speaking to him, if he were to stand up, let's say on this arm brace issue, you'll notice on the main Mishaco channel, even though we think the arm brace thing is bullshit, even though we think that it'll be overturned eventually, you don't see us putting out videos involving arm braces. Because if he did, we did, he could have to leave his family, and he would have to leave his job as a firefighter, and who knows how many lives might not be saved if he wasn't there. Likewise for me, or any other FFL. Even if we're not in court standing up for things and becoming a martyr, dealers are a good thing. We move guns to people every day. I take pride in what I do. I'm not saying I do a huge amount, but I have my own little part, my own little tiny piece of the pie, where I contribute, hopefully positively, to the 2A community. And I also have always, ever since even college, done my best to be a good ambassador to people who don't like firearms, or more often is the case, are just afraid of firearms, to try to show them that no, most gun owners are very responsible, clean, no flaws in their record, no arrests, people. And I hope I've at least opened a few people's eyes over the years to that, and supported in some small ways, because I realize that I myself, I'm not going to make any big impacts on that, and I'm not cut out to risk going to jail. Just not who I am. But I can do what I can do, and I'll acknowledge my small part more than grandstanding about a big part and not actually following through. Because it's easy to say stuff online. It's easy to kind of have that mental disconnect between online and real life. And I think Matt got caught up in that. I think he kind of forgot that YouTube and Insta and all that, the ATF looks at that too. In fact, that's one of the first things the ATF told me with inspections is they watch the channel. And it wasn't threatening, but it was also them kind of tacitly saying, don't be a dumbass and put stuff on here that's going to cause us to have to ask questions. And I'm only speaking to my local agents. I personally have had good luck with them. Even consider them good guys, but that's just guys in Arkansas. Keep in mind, the field agents are very, very different from the people at the top and people at Tech Branch and all that stuff. Most of the field agents are underpaid and overworked, blue-collar guys like most of us here. Working class blokes. Not to say there aren't some jerks. I've met some. But I've actually met more decent guys, especially if you don't give them any headaches, than not. And the fun fact is, most other FFLs, most other dealers, if you talk to them, they'll say similar things. Now, I have known a few dealers to get shut down by the ATF locally. It just so happens that they were doing things like selling guns out the back door without any paperwork or background checks. Yeah, they don't like that. Another thing they don't like is if you lose guns. You might think, how can you lose a gun? Trust me, over the years, guns come in, guns go out, especially like receivers and things like that. It's possible. Things go missing. And of course, if you have a retail store, things can get stolen. Yeah. So when someone does what he did, it doesn't make the gun community look great to the rest of the world, to the 2A. It really, really doesn't. And that's a good segue to talk about the Fifth Amendment. Those saying using his videos against him in court violates his Fifth Amendment, no, that's not what the Fifth Amendment means and how it's applied. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to use witnesses in court. I mean, if someone told their friend that they killed someone or put it on YouTube and then they later say, I plead the Fifth, you can't say that. No, you voluntarily said something. What Matt voluntarily said and then voluntarily put on YouTube and put to public where everyone could see, that's out there. The Fifth is when you're in custody to keep from self-incrimination. And I'm going to be honest too, pleading the Fifth basically in court, although it won't be overtly said, is basically saying, yeah, I did it, or yeah, I'm guilty of this. Officially, it shouldn't be interpreted that way, but unofficially, people always ask, well, why is he pleading the Fifth? That's, just how it is. So no, this is not a violation of his Fifth Amendment. This isn't even subjective. Objectively, it's not. I think I'm wrong. Cool. Ask your lawyer, an actual lawyer, not someone on forums that slays their lawyer, and they'll tell you no, that his Fifth Amendment was not violated. If it had been, his defense attorney would have brought that up. There's much more argument to be made for First and Second Amendment. Fifth holds no water. All right, I think that's most of the points that I've come across. Again, this is apropos of nothing. I'm sitting outside on my swing, and it's very hot, even though it's nighttime. It's July. It's supposed to be 102 tomorrow. Yay! But then 77 a couple of days later, because Arkansas, fuck you, that's why. Yeah. Guys. The fact is, when people say things like, he did this wrong, or should have, that's not to say they wish someone ill. And I think that's lost in the modern world. Someone can not like something happening, but still say it happened. Just because you accept a bad thing happened is not endorsing that bad thing. Does that make sense? I'm sure it does. Also, not agreeing with the community, whatever community you're in, not towing the party line 100%, that's healthy. That's having discourse and dialogue and discussion. It does disturb me that in so many arenas today, people have to stick to the party line no matter what. And that's not what America's ever been based on. We've been based on individuality and discussion and debate. And, we can have general agreement, but have, disagreements on some of the details within anything. When everyone starts kind of getting in lockstep and 100% agreement, that's scary. Also, when people start demonizing the other, that's scary. The other is just another citizen. The ATF isn't made of men in black, alien entities. They're made of people. Some are good, some are assholes, some are hard workers, some are slackers, some have an agenda. Some are even pro-gun, believe it or not. I want to humanize them. I also want to humanize the jurors and the judge. Because we've already humanized Matt, and to a lesser extent, you hear people talking about Justin. And that's good. We should. We should take them as people, acknowledge that they have families and loved ones. Everyone does. And they can still be wrong and good people. They can be right and bad people. And bad is even subjective. What does that even mean? Now, I'm not a nihilist, far from it. In fact, I rather hate nihilists. I really hate the, nothing matters, what does it all matter? No, bullshit. Life matters. Life matters a lot. Anyone who knows me in person knows I'm kind of a staunch idealist. But I'm realistic in my idealism because that's how age does. You get older and you realize sometimes you got to live to fight another day. I plan on being an FFL for the long haul and fighting where I can, donating money and contributing where I can. Talking about this situation, talking about why this conviction happened so that in future people can avoid the pitfalls. Because there are a few things Matt could have done differently, and it probably would have either resulted in him getting acquitted or even not getting arrested at all. It was just a convergence of events. I'd really like to know if he did receive a cease and desist letter. I really would, or Justin for that matter. If they didn't, that's one thing. If they did and they continued on, that is something else. I will say that in other things like the arm brace situation and all that, companies did receive letters before things move forward. But I don't know. Will this go forward and be appealed? Absolutely. Will the Supreme Court hear it? There's the reality. There's what I think will happen and hope will happen. What I hope will happen will be yes. Absolutely. I'd love to have this go before this current Supreme Court. What I think will happen, what history has pointed to, the Supreme Court is very reluctant to get into machine gun cases. Otherwise, the NFA would not have stood for 90 years. So I can only go on history there. I can also tell you this. There's a ton of gun laws on the books. So the idea of Democrats passing new ones is absurd. A lot of the ones we have right now are not enforced. You can kind of guess ones I'm thinking about. They have a 22 in the middle. Anyway, a lot of them are just unenforceable. Others are enforced when they're trying to kind of tack on charges. But one, the ATF and its predecessor even, have always been pretty hard on and really gone towards, like a dog whistle, machine guns. That's always been a very bold line in the sand. Most gun people know you can kind of fudge some other things. You do not fuck with machine guns. And if you do, and you're public about it, you know you're running a big risk. And you might be willing to take that risk. That's fine. And it potentially could result in overturning a law that's been around for almost a century. If so, then huzzah, you're a hero. That's the reward. But the risk, which historically is far more likely, is you lose everything. Matt, unless his case gets overturned, even if he only gets time served, probation, yada yada, he will never be able to own firearms again, much less have an FFL. That's something that's over for him, barring a miracle. Miracles can happen. And yes, a lot of money has been donated to his family. He's also going to have a lot of court costs and fees, especially if he goes to jail. I really, really feel for his family. I really do. He doesn't deserve to go to jail. What he did at most was a white collar, was a business crime. But I want you to realize this. The legal system may be unfair. He may, under the law, the way it's interpreted, have broken it. But the law might not be just. But if it's this way for him, please realize that it's this way for lots of people who've been behind bars for years and decades, or even if they're out now, served for years and decades. And Matt's lucky. He had the support of a community, and he had financing for a lawyer. A lot of people, and yeah, I am thinking of minorities, or if not minorities, just poor white people from around here in Arkansas. They don't have two nickels to rub together, and no support. They go to trial. They have to work with a public defender who is himself or herself overworked, tired, maybe disinterested, maybe not. Some public defenders are excellent people, but they're very, very tired. So he gets the free lunch type defense, the school lunch attorney, and he has no community to support, or she. Please consider that. Please consider that our nation has so many more people jailed by the percentage than most other first world countries in this world. I mean, it's absurd the number of people we have jailed. Meanwhile, because the jails are, overflowing, other people get out. It's nuts. Kind of makes me think of this too. People say that just because Matt talked about something, had pictures of something, sold pictures, why is that illegal? Well, CP is illegal. I think we can all agree that definitely is something that should be illegal. It's just pictures. Someone who has it may have never had anything to do with that. But just by having those pictures, owning them as a file, that is justifiably a limitation on your First Amendment. I've said before, there are some benefits to being blind. Never even accidentally stumbling across that, I consider to be one of those. Moving on, but I just wanted to point that out because that's kind of a severe case of where just having pictures and not doing anything directly can justifiably get you into major trouble. Those people, unlike Matt, deserve jail, like real jail, real jail. Yeah, and that's what I wish jail is reserved for. Actual people who commit actual crimes, and people who commit white-collar crimes, okay, maybe we have some other way to deal with them. But that's kind of getting off topic. It's been said that Matt fucked around and found out that Matt poked the bear. Hard to disagree with that. But the question is, why is the bear there? Why has it been around for a century? Now, this isn't a Democrat problem or a Republican problem. Going back to what we talked about, 2016, the Republicans, when it was election season, really touted the Hearing Safe Act. That went away in 2017. They've had control of Congress multiple times over the years. Why has no bill ever made it to the floor? Yeah, representatives will create a bill to abolish the ATF or, defund it or repeal the NFA. Those are token bills. Those are bills that when it comes election season, they can say, look, I did this. They never even usually get to committee or get out of committee, much less get serious support on the floor. That's because the vast majority of Americans do not want the NFA repealed. The vast majority of Americans do not believe citizens should be able to go buy automatic weapons. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm just saying, if you took 1,000 people and asked them that question, getting 100 from kind of each region of the country, you'll get most saying, no, they should be illegal or strictly controlled. That's just where we're at. Funny, too, that when presidents do executive orders, Republicans and Democrats both are about as equally harsh on guns. As I said, Bush in '89. Yes, Obama in 14 with Russia and all that. But then the bump stock ban, which is really what allowed the ATF to expand its powers, that was Trump, guys. Now, don't get me wrong, Biden took full advantage of that door in 2021 and further expanded the ATF, and that is terrifying. But what's happening, congressmen, senators, presidents even, don't want to make a hardline stand on something because it could hurt them come next election cycle. So what do? You kick it down to the bureaucratic level, to the agency level. Let them make the hard calls. If it's bad, unpopular, you blame them. Blame the EPA, blame the ATF. If it's popular, you take credit for it. Oh, I did this. I ordered them to do it. It gives deniability, but also leaves the door open where they can claim responsibility. This is what just disgusts me. It really bugs me. And it's especially bad in Congress now. It seems like most congressmen, instead of really buckling down and doing their job, passing laws, debating things, they're all about the 5-minute soundbite on MSNBC or Fox or CNN or Newsmax. They're all about that. They're all about the gotcha moment. That's not fucking their job. Their job is to do the hard work, to sit there on a table, yelling and banging their fists and sweating and going without dinner to compromise so that the most number of Americans at least get something. Because we do share this country. This isn't a Republican nation. It's not a Democrat nation. It's an American nation. And guess what? The other side, they're just as much Americans as your side, as my side. And we have to remember that. And that's why if we're going to attack something like the NFA, we need to do it in a more persuasive, less blunt, confrontational manner. Again, just kind of like how marijuana has become slowly but surely legal. And it's been a popular thing, by and large. I've heard very few people go against it. But it was a agonizingly slow process, and it's not over yet. It's possible, yeah, we can get a case to the Supreme Court if they're willing to hear it, and if they're willing to rule against the NFA. It's possible it could get overturned. It is. But it's more likely this is going to come as a referendum, as voting. That's how the NFA was put in place. That's how it needs to go. And that's really what I want. The court should not be making law or even changing law. That's Congress's job. And it's supposed to be ratified and implemented by the executive. And we've gotten away from that. We want the bureaucrats in the courts, or we don't want, but that the government wants the bureaucrats in the courts to do things. That's why Roe v. Wade was overturned. How many years, decades did the Democrats have to pass a law in Congress? They didn't do it because it would have been politically dangerous. And now it got shot down. We need to get back to that in a certain way. Congress needs to get back to making the tough calls and maybe risking upsetting some people. But for one, me, I would respect that. I respect someone who can risk being unpopular. That's how I am. But again, I also have that attitude that I don't have to agree with everyone all the time. I can still like you, still consider you a friend, and just not agree with you on something. I would rather find it a boring world if we all agreed. That's just me, though. But guess we'll see where this goes. You know, like I said at the beginning with the Patreon stuff, that was a very off-the-cuff opinion that Fox and I gave. Well, this is my more in-depth opinion after digging into it, reading, watching videos, going over what I could find at the court, and kind of where we're still at. And people who want to challenge it, this is what you have to take note of. And kind of pick the battles worth fighting. Frankly, I think trying to topple something that's been around so long is a bit ambitious. You're probably better off trying to go for the arm braces, the bump stocks, maybe a little bit further back like the 89 import restrictions. of course, there is also the alternative. If you do topple the NFA, it kind of takes all the gun laws with it. But in a nation where people are still saying we need to do more, we need to stop gun violence, shootings, let's be real, that would be ridiculously unpopular with even a good chunk of gun owners. Not to mention anti-gun people. Yeah. I'm just trying to be realistic, guys. I'm not saying what I want, what I hope, what I feel. I'm trying to give as impartial an analysis as possible. And I think we have to all admit to ourselves our personal bias, our personal interpretation. If we can do that, we'll get a clearer, although not perfect, perspective. And I think if Matt had done that, if he'd stepped back for a minute and kind of let the stars in his eyes fade for a while, he might have realized that he was risking a little too much. He'd stepped a little too far. And I don't know. Again, he could win it on appeal. I hope for his family's sake he does. But in the past, when people have been convicted of machine gun charges, which he has been convicted of, you could argue he wasn't doing machine guns, but a jury of 12 says he was. In the past, people convicted of machine gun charges don't win on appeals. That's just how the law has gone all these years. Anyway, probably about killing the second battery as it is. Impromptu black box. Wasn't really planning on this, but I thought this would be a good place to air my thoughts and hear your comments. And if I feel like it, I might condense it down into a video for the Mishaco channel if it's worthwhile. Because we all do need to be informed best we can. And at least if someone wants to challenge in court, I hope they know what's at stake and what could happen. But yeah. This is Misha, and catch you very soon next time.